So we're just going to take some titanium white and regular black paint, some stiff brushes. You're going to cover your canvas in the black. You may have to do a couple layers to get it completely covered. The idea is that you don't want any of the white of the canvas poking through. So let each layer dry before adding a new layer. Right here I've just created a gray tone using black and white mixed together. It can be any tone you want, doesn't have to match mine. I'm using a sponge right here. It's actually an artist sponge. You can find them at any craft store. And I like to get it a little damp. It just makes it a lot easier to continuously blend that acrylic out. You'll notice that I switch back and forth from my brush to that sponge. My brush is also a little damp. The trick is you don't want them soaking wet, you want them just slightly damp. And play around with it and you'll figure out a technique that works best for you. So this is me concentrating on the center because we want that center to be much brighter than the outer rings of the galaxy because the center is where the star is going to be. Now it's really important to let these layers dry because we're building it up so bright and we want it to have that glow effect. This is me adding some lighter tones, basically trying to give depth and dimension to the outer rings of the galaxy, so maybe the light is hitting the tops of these clouds. And this process can take a minute. You're gonna just keep blending, keep adding lighter tones. Eventually we're gonna add some darker tones to it to give it even a little more depth and dimension. So like I was saying earlier, in the center when you're building up these brighter tones to give it that glow effect, you're going to want to wait until those layers dry before going back in with a lighter tone. Otherwise it kind of just blends in with the bottom layer and still becomes one tone, and that's what you don't want. You want it to be real bright in the center, and you want your base shine to be a little darker. And so here I am with a smaller brush. It's not really a detail brush, it's just a smaller mop brush that I'm using to add some more depth and dimension by going in with darker tones, basically at the base of these clouds. And you're gonna have to play around with this because a lot of times I'll hate the way something looks and then I just use my gray tones to kind of cover it. So this is a forgiving process because it is a galaxy, so it's kind of hard to mess it up. Feel free to play around with it. Don't focus too much on trying to make it absolutely perfect. You can tell right here that I'm just kind of loosely placing this black paint. So I'm not trying to make it too structured. I'm not focusing too much on it. I'm just kind of putting it in there, and you can always work around it later. You can fix it, you can cover it up, whatever. This is supposed to be a freeing process. I've learned that when I'm focusing far too hard on making everything perfect, I end up hating it when I'm finished. Still just building up that center layer, trying to get it as bright as possible in the center. That can take a hot minute and a lot of patience. I'm not really sure why I didn't do it with this painting, but normally when I'm doing a space painting, I'll actually flick my background stars onto the canvas before I ever even start painting the subject matter. I didn't do it here for some reason, but that's complete. It's fine. It's fine if you do it before or after. I just find sometimes it's easier to do it beforehand. This is me still blending out that center. This is me using that stiffer brush to kind of soften the edges. You don't want it to be such a hard line right there because it's like it's supposed to mimic light. So you want it to kind of fade out and you want it to be a smooth gradient. And don't be afraid to, turn your canvas around and flip it around. Do whatever you need to do to get the angles you want. And you can actually see, I guess I didn't film me flicking some of those stars on there, but I do have a tutorial up of how I do my realistic stars. So you should definitely go check that out. But basically all I did was get a little bit of water in the white paint and I used a almost plasticky kind of brush, but you can use a toothbrush, you can use a really stiff brush, whatever you need to do, and you just use your finger to flick the paint onto the canvas. Here I'm just adding a little bit of white to the bottom, and it's more of that gray tone actually, and it's, you know, it's basically just to make it appear like the light is coming from underneath the galaxy as well, if that makes sense. Here I'm using a small detail brush, like a liner brush, to just add some smaller dust clouds, gas clouds, space stuff, kind of coming across the white area, just to give it, again, some more depth and dimension. If you're familiar at all with the SpaceX Starship program, then you probably have heard of CSI Starbase, and if you haven't, I highly suggest you go check out his YouTube channel because it is absolutely amazing. All of his content is incredible. He put so much work into it. And anyways, he ended up buying this painting, which is super cool. I'm a huge fan of Zach. This is me just basically hand placing some of the stars that I want to turn into glowing stars later on. I'm not really sure why I did this, but I'm assuming I put all this black underneath because I didn't like the way it was softened, how the edge was. I think it must have just been too much. I can't really tell on camera, but that's what I meant by you can always cover something up and start redoing it. So this is me working on details while I wait for that black layer to dry, and then I'm going back in and softening that edge of the light shining underneath the galaxy, just going in with a darker tone and softening those edges. This is always my favorite part of any space painting I do, the stars. I love doing stars. As I mentioned earlier, I do have a tutorial on how I do these stars. Sometimes it's easier for me to have my canvas laying flat when I do these stars instead of it sitting on an easel at a strange angle. So again, feel free to move your canvas around. It doesn't have to stay in one position the entire time you paint. Do whatever you need to do. That's me covering up a star I clearly did not like. And there, okay, well that was a weird edit. I apologize. I'm just going through here and adding finer details and dotting my stars. This is the brush that I use that has plastic bristles that I use to flick my paint. Again, you don't need that. You can use any brush really will work. It's kind of hard to explain how I do my stars using a voiceover, but if you go watch that video and if you paint it along with me, please let me know. Feel free to tag me in it. And anyways, guys, thank you so much. I hope that helped.